When should parents start these conversations? Is it freshman year? Is it seventh, eighth grade? Like, what's your recommendation? When do we start having these, hey kids, we need to start looking at scholarship talk? Does it start with the scholarship talk? Does it start with, thinking about careers? Like, how do we start to turn our kids' minds in this direction, and about what age do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as possible. Obviously, depending on the age, depends on the conversation you have. But early financial literacy is so great. We always encourage people to start talking to their kids early about money. It doesn't necessarily have to be college or scholarships, but talk to them about how money works, how budget works, how different things in that space, how it works. Have those conversations. And then usually around middle school, I like to recommend that parents start talking to their kids about college and scholarships. That's the time to start thinking about classes and extracurricular activities and just kind of what that's going to look like as they go into high school. And then freshman year is where I really encourage people to get intentional about those conversations about college. So start talking about scholarships in college. And it's not so much that you need to be thinking about applications at that point. I feel like sometimes people go, oh, start applying for scholarships freshman year. And then they get really focused on that. And that's not really the primary focal point at that point. I want you to start thinking about, what do you want your high school journey to look like? What kind of things can you do to stand out in the application process? So if you spend, the first 3 years of high school really building up your resume, you're going to have so much more to talk about your senior year whenever there's the most applications available, whenever you're applying for college and a bunch of scholarships. So, you know, freshman year, start having those conversations about class schedule, what kind of things you're going to be doing throughout high school, extracurriculars, how to build up that resume and work hard on implementing that throughout high school. And then senior year, go all in.
And now, if this is like a foreign topic to some, they're like, okay, that's interesting, and they're like, okay, well, are there certain activities? Are there, when you say start thinking about classes, can you unpack like how are we talking to our kids about classes or activities? Are there some that look better on resumes than others? I mean, you've been doing this for 10 years, so like for those parents who will be navigating this conversation for the first, like that, you just said something that was like, oh, well, I better get on this, and but they don't know, how to navigate that conversation with their child, but they want to. What are just some tidbits that you can give them on that?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is, help kids lean into what they love. So a lot of times people think about scholars and they think like, oh man, to win a scholarship, you have to be the star athlete, you have to be valedictorian, class president, like these specific set of things. And I always encourage people like, no, it's about finding activities that your student loves and then helping them lean into that. So I always talk about like your resume is built around two basic ideas, range and intensity. So range, it's the amount and variety of activities you participate in. And intensity is the depth in the level of involvement that you have. So you want to participate in a good variety of activities, but you also want to have activities that you go deep in and that you're really involved in. So encourage your students to be active and try different things. So, especially freshman year and maybe even in middle school, start trying different sports, different activities. What kind of things do they like to do? What interests do they have? And then as you get into high school, really start leaning into those activities. So, try to take up leadership roles, try to, see if there's different ways that you can lean in farther, maybe take extra classes on a certain topic or, get extra tutoring, but just, try to figure out what are those things that you really want to lean into and build up so that you kind of stand out in the process. Another thing that looks really awesome on applications, both to college and for scholarships, is volunteer work, which I love sharing that because it's like some people think, well, I'm not a star athlete and I don't really have any super amazing talents, but everyone can volunteer. And when you think about it, scholarships, they're given away by people who have a heart to give back by helping students. So it makes sense that they would value volunteer work because it kind of shows that their investment is going to pay forward in the world. Like if they invest a scholarship in someone who loves to volunteer, then that person is more likely to continue giving and volunteering moving forward. So that is definitely a really awesome way that people can stand out. And even within that, something else that stands out in the application process is leadership. So one of the ways that I really stood out whenever I was in high school was I created a shoe drive that sent shoes to countries where people were dying from parasites entering their feet. And it was a volunteer project that I created. So it looked, very interesting that I had the drive and initiative to create it, but it was something that I really loved doing and just really enjoyed doing that to give back. And it's something that anyone could do. Anyone could create that type of project. It wasn't that I had some super abilities. Any kid could do that and stand out in the process. So finding those things that you love and really leaning into them can help so much.
And how important is it for parents to really cultivate a relationship with their kids' guidance counselor to help navigate this journey as well?
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, definitely leaning into that relationship is great, especially when it comes to the scholarship application process, because one of the best places to look for scholarships is with local scholarships. So the connection to those local scholarships is the guidance counselor. A lot of times they're not listed in the big databases. So if one of your somebody a local community member creates a scholarship, a lot of times they're going to try to connect with that guidance counselor. So you do want to make sure that you're staying in touch with them, stay up to date. I know some guidance counselors complain that like they'll send out emails and no one checks the email, but it's like they're full of all these amazing local scholarships that don't have a ton of competition. So really make sure you stay on top of that. Now, a lot of schools, their ratio of students to guidance counselors, it's like 1 to 400. So a lot of times these guidance counselors are pretty stressed out. So I encourage parents and students to have a lot of grace with these guidance counselors, especially, a lot of times these guidance counselors are going to be writing a recommendation letter for college. So whenever, you're interacting with them, be kind, be empathetic, because there's often a lot on their plates. And if you do show that respect and, that initiative, they can be such a great connection to help you find scholarships and in the application process.
And you mentioned the word databases. There are databases of scholarships, but I mean, are some better than others? Because I don't know. I feel like sometimes when you Google, like you see some stuff, and you're like, is this real? Is this possible? Is this like something somebody just threw up to try and get my information? So what's your thoughts on the databases that are out there and finding ones that are legit and, generate some sound opportunities?
Yeah, the scholarship search, it actually can be one of the most frustrating parts of the process because there are tons of scholarships out there, but finding the best ones for you can be tricky and challenging. So there are a ton of scholarship databases. These are basically scholarship search engines. It's where you go and you can enter in information about you, your sports you participate in, what type of clubs or groups you do, volunteer work, your future career. And they search through several scholarships to match you with scholarships that specifically fit you. So that's the idea behind them. Now, sometimes they can be frustrating because you'll enter in information and you maybe aren't matched with a lot of scholarships that you actually should be matched with, or you get a bunch of kind of spammy scholarships or sweepstakes scholarships. So don't just take the list that they generate from one scholarship database and say, this is exactly what I'm going to apply for. I usually recommend that students use like 5 scholarship databases and then have their lists and compare and contrast them to create a list of scholarships that really seem like the best fit for you. I know that seems kind of complicated and it's like, oh, why can't we just have one spot? And, we're constantly trying to talk to scholarship databases and see, which ones are the best ones and how can this process improve. But for now, I just encourage people to really take the time to create that list because even though it can be a little bit frustrating on the front end, once you get that solid list, you can just start knocking out applications and, really moving forward on that. Also, a lot of people, kind of feel like, oh man, like this application process, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to apply for a bunch of them. They have essays. But what's cool is like once you've applied for a few scholarships, you can actually recycle a lot of your application elements. So, like the essay, for example, I know is a frustrating factor for a lot of students. They're like, oh, I hate writing essays. But if you have about like 5 or 6 really solid essays, a lot of times scholarship programs will ask similar questions. So you can just kind of have those 5 or 6 essays and recycle them for different applications, kind of tweak them and adjust them to fit the answers. So the application process really does get easier as you go along.
So now you hear the terms scholarship and grant sometimes used interchangeably. Can you break down the difference between them? And is it the same process to find a grant as it is a scholarship?
So grants are typically based around financial need. So students will be required to fill out the FAFSA if they want to be eligible for financial need with the school or financial aid with the school, which I encourage everybody to really apply, even if you have a higher income, because sometimes people are surprised. There's people who make well into the 6 figures who still apply, who still are eligible for financial aid. So make sure to fill out the FAFSA. And grants are usually what come with that financial aid package. You might get a federal grant, you might get a state grant, you might get a school based grant. Now, scholarships, that's typically a different application process. There are some scholarships that are merit scholarships that are given through the school. So if you go to a school's financial aid website, a lot of times they'll have listed their automatic merit scholarships. So these are scholarships that are based on your GPA and your ACT or SAT score. And this is really helpful, especially if a student is a really competitive applicant. I really encourage them to, in their search process for a college, look at that part of the website because you may find, hey, I have a 34 on the ACT and a 4.0. And it's like at one school, you may not get a lot of merit scholarships, but you may get an automatic full ride if you're able to get admitted at a different school. So that's a really cool thing. Not everybody has perfect grades. I speak to a lot of students who don't have perfect grades. I didn't have perfect grades and test scores, so that was not the route for me. But if you do happen to have really strong academics, make sure you check out those automatic merit-based scholarships that's at the school because it can be one of the easiest ways to win scholarships once you have those grades and test scores. And then outside scholarships, those often require separate applications. Like we said, you can go through the scholarship databases. Some databases that we recommend are Scholarship Owl, Scholly, CapEx, Unigo, and Big Future. Those are some great places to start. If you Google scholarship databases, there's several blog posts that have a huge list of scholarship databases. So again, try to find like 5 of them, and try out different databases to get your list created. And then I still recommend, as basic as this sounds, like a good old fashioned Google search. So I usually have people write down their unique qualities. So write down activities that you participate in, maybe types of volunteer work that you do, clubs you're involved in, maybe your future goals, and then go into Google and do a targeted search. So let's say you want to be in STEM. You could do scholarships for STEM majors, or if you're a runner, you could do like runner, comma, scholarships. And a lot of times those will generate really great search results that go directly to the programs giving away the scholarships. So create that unique list of activities and then dig into what search results are available.